Hello and Merry Christmas from us here at Strange Pathways. I am your host, Scott Mort. We're doing a light show. And I understand that this show may not be for everyone. But I was tempted to take the day off. But a few years ago, I was very lonely. I was very, very lonely. And I spent not one, not two, but 3 Christmases pretty alone. All my friends were with their families. I don't have any real family left. And yeah, I was alone. Now, I'm lucky enough now that I have my wife. But what got me through those Christmases were podcasts. So I wanted to put something out there. Just so that somebody out there who's feeling very, very alone, they would have this to keep them going. And I do want to let you know, it will get better. Keep going through. And you've got one friend right here. Each of our stories this week come from one single source, paranormalworld.fandom.com. I wanted to find some Christmas-themed encounters, and by heavens, if I didn't find the motherlode. Our first tale takes us back quite a ways. Andy W. is an adult now, but at the time of this incident, he would have been 8 or 9. And it is Christmas morning. He's lying in bed. And he hears, maybe it's a noise, maybe it's a feeling, but he feels compelled to leave his bed. He walks through his bedroom door towards the stairs of his home. And he knew he was kind of breaking some rules of the house. One of the rules was if you wake up early Christmas morning, that no, just go back to bed. Now, the house that Andy W. was in, it has a 2-tiered staircase. Andy can't really see around the first level of it. He doesn't really remember walking down the stairs. He feels like he just floated. And he floats down to the first level of the stairs and comes to the landing in between the tiers. At this point, if you were in Andy's home, you could look into the living room. And in the living room, they have a beautiful Christmas tree set up. Next to the tree, Andy sees his sister. And his sister is talking to a large man wearing a red suit with a thick white beard. It's Santa Claus. Andy runs down the second flight of stairs right into Santa's arms. Santa shows the children their presents, tells them, okay, you have to go back to bed. Andy and his sisters, they don't say no. With smiles on their faces, they curl up in their beds, knowing that they've just experienced a Christmas miracle. And he wakes up. And all that hope is still in his heart. He, as he gets older, he begins to really doubt what had happened. But as he gets older, he's kind of like you and me. He starts watching documentaries about alien abductions. He starts reading stories about them. He starts to develop this theory. Now, he doesn't talk to his family about this. We've talked about this before. A lot of people will keep things very, very secret for a very, very long time. But he does think, maybe I should ask my sister if you remember this happening. But he can't really summon the nerve. He gets into his teenage years. And he asks his sister, did anything weird ever happen to us on Christmas Day? She goes, not really, but there was this one time. I remember one time hearing a noise and getting out of bed. And then I woke up and I was back in my bed, but I'd lost time. It was a few hours later. Now, you and I know this sounds an awful lot like alien abductions. Now, Andy didn't tell his sister any of the details of this. He's remained anonymous. He is still planning, as of 2014, he was still planning to take his sister to a hypnotist to try to unlock some of the memories she has of that incident. This story, it's kind of cute. It's kind of fun, lighthearted. But to my surprise, there are a lot more experiences people have with Santa Claus. I submit to you the story of Claxton Kallenbach. Now, Claxton, he witnessed a tale that he told about on about.com. And he swears up and down this is true. Christmas Eve 2002, Claxton Kallenbach's parents had invited a group of friends and relatives to their home in New York. It's a Christmas Eve celebration that they have often. It's dinner for friends, relatives. Claxton, however, he gets very bored. The main festivities are over, and Claxton decides to go up to his bedroom to watch television. But I feel like Claxton and I are quite similar. On Christmas, at least growing up, whenever you couldn't choose on demand or what have you, there was nothing on that he really wanted to watch. I find the internet is that way as well. I go to boards and forums and everything's quiet. So I get that. If you don't have entertainment on hand, Christmas sometimes can be quite boring. He decides that he just kind of wants to kill some time. So he starts just pacing back and forth in the hallway. Everyone else, friends and family, they were in the living room watching some Christmas movie that Claxton didn't want to watch. And he's just up there pacing. This house that Claxton's in, it was very large. And there's nobody else in the hallway with him. Claxton, for whatever reason, is just pacing back and forth for about 7 minutes. And that's whenever he sees it. about 20 feet away from him, he sees a tall, fat man crouched down, wearing not quite a Santa suit, but some sort of Santa Claus outfit. Now, Claxton, a little bit less in the holiday spirit, he didn't believe in Santa. This was horrifying to Claxton. There's a strange man in his house. Claxton panics. He runs down the stairs to his parents, and he tells them about it. But they just kind of grinned and said, well, that was Santa Claus. Claxton doesn't believe it still. He can't get them to move. Now, I don't know about you, but I find this to be very, very odd behavior. If I lived in a large house, take, for example, the house that I'm in now, 4,500 square feet. My house is so large that there are rooms that we just don't use. If my child ran down the stairs and he said, I was pacing back and forth in the hallway and I saw a man up there, oh, you bet I would go upstairs. So this to me is a very odd behavior. But they just laugh it off. Claxton, realizing the futility of it all, just sits down for safety. The safety of numbers. And just watches the movie. 2 years later, once again, Christmas Eve, 2004, Claxton is on the couch in the living room, lying down. His parents, they're in the kitchen, talking about like a business blog or what have you. He sees a giant man, 7-8 foot tall, crawl underneath the Christmas tree. This giant man looks at him and goes, shh, and vanishes. This isn't the only 2 times. Christmas Eve after Christmas Eve after Christmas Eve, Claxton has sightings of Santa. 2007, Claxton, this is a very notable incident. Claxton sees a tall figure wearing a Santa hat trudging past him. Claxton's able to see it for just a few seconds, and then it disappears. Let's go back to sometime in the 1980s. Memphis, Tennessee. There is a lady named Mrs. Wages. She's a lady now. At the time, she was only 8 or 9 years old. Now, Mrs. Wages and her parents, they're just coming home from a Christmas party on Christmas Eve. They pull up to the driveway of their house, and all 3 of them see what seemed to be Santa in his sleigh hovering over their house, sleigh bells ringing. It was deafening. It blocked out all the other sounds in the neighborhood. The sleigh itself was lit up. It seemed to give off an ethereal glow, and all of them could see Santa sitting in the sleigh, decked out exactly as you think Santa would be. There's even reindeer. Now, Mrs. Wages can't remember how many reindeer there were. Santa looks at them, waves at them from the sleigh, and then flies away. She looks over at her dad. Total shock. Total shock. What does her dad do? Air traffic controller. This is a guy who's used to seeing stuff in the air. This is a man who should know everything that's up there. He even goes back to work after the holidays and asks his friends at work, "Hey, was anything in my area?" Nothing. Flash forward to Black Friday 2009. Mrs. Wages is waiting in line at Target, a store I wish we had around here. If anybody from the Target company is listening, hey, Johnstown could use one. And a Walgreens, please. If you want to give me what I want for Christmas, a Target and a Walgreens within reasonable driving distance. Mrs. Wages was talking to another woman about Christmas shopping. And this woman goes, "Hey, you know what? My brother saw Santa in his sleigh 2 years. Just out of nowhere, too." Mrs. Wages is stunned. She had kind of chalked it up to a fluke of her imagination. But this wasn't a localized event. Other people had seen something like that. Let's go to Christmas 2006. Now, this witness, a child, has decided to stay anonymous. And this child is crying. One of their cousins had told them Santa wasn't real. Now, we all know he is, obviously. History shows that Santa was real, St. Nicholas. They're coming home from their aunt's house, and they had just been through a party, a loud, raucous party. Now they're rounding the corner of their street, and this is whenever this anonymous child sees a big red sleigh and reindeer on the roof of their home. Next to the chimney, Santa pops out. The next morning, the child asks everyone, "Hey, what happened last night?" But no one else remembers. No one else remembers this happening. But a little bit later on, just a day or so later, and that fresh snow is still on the roof, there's a leak happening. The father goes up to fix that leak, and they see in the snow long, straight lines, as if left by a sleigh, fresh in the snow. I present to you the case of Sarah A. Now, while she was a child, Sarah A. had been visiting with her aunt. Her aunt had come to visit Sarah and her family. Now, with the aunt visiting, it was decided that the aunt would take Sarah's bed, and Sarah would sleep in a sleeping bag on the floor. It wasn't very comfortable. And Sarah wasn't able to really get that deep, deep sleep. She kind of wakes up every now and then, readjusts, falls back. Around 2:30 in the morning, that's whenever Sarah notices that dim glow coming into the room from under the door. Sarah gets up, walks over to the door, opens it very slowly, and looks out into the hallway. She closes her eyes tight and opens them again. And she still sees that figure standing in a doorway that has a mystical, magical glow around them. In Sarah's mind, this is Santa Claus. But this Santa Claus is surrounded by a glittering silver and gold haze. Santa looks straight at Sarah, his lips not moving. Mentally, telepathically speaks to her and says, "Now you know you are supposed to be asleep while I am here, don't you?" Sarah's a little scared. And Sarah says that she knew she was supposed to be asleep, but she couldn't. It was too uncomfortable. Santa looks at her and says, "Close your eyes and at least pretend." Sarah decides that this maybe was just a dream. She's unable to reconcile it, though, because it felt so very, very real. On some level, Sarah knows she was awake. She was, whenever this was recorded, Sarah was 41 years old. And to this day, she believes deep down in her soul that this is 100% the spirit of Santa Claus. Consider the story of Anna. Anna was 5 years old, trying to sleep in her bedroom, whenever she hears a shuffling noise from the living room. She gets out of bed, peeks through the doorway, and she sees Santa in front of the Christmas tree. She's convinced this isn't really Santa. This is a man in a Santa costume. But whatever this was, felt her presence. He turned around and stared at her. But this Santa didn't look jolly, didn't look happy, did not even look kind. He was creepy. She said he had an eerie air about him, and that it felt like he was staring into Anna's soul. She was terrified. Now remember, this is a child who's been told, holly jolly, Santa's good, loves everyone, would never hurt anybody. But this Santa is terrifying her. Anna runs to her parents' rooms and hides under the covers. And she can't explain why she feels so scared. But she writes it off as a dream. Years later, Anna remembers it and comes to the conclusion that it could have been a burglar. So she asks her parents about this. Nothing was missing from the apartment. The only time they'd ever been robbed was after they'd moved out of that apartment. What the conclusion is that Anna has come to is that she saw some sort of apparition disguising itself as Santa. And finally, we have the testimony of Jade. Now, Jade was 7 years old in 2003. It's midnight, Christmas Eve. She had stayed awake. This was the year she was going to see Santa. And she is just filled with the excitement of Christmas. Now, she was in bed when a bright red light shoots through the sky and through her window. This light was extremely bright. And in her mind, she thinks, this is Santa. She jumps out of bed, looks through the window, and she sees that this bright red light is coming from a small object that she can't really wrap her head around. It's not a helicopter or anything, but she could hear the sound of bells and hooves tapping on the roof. That light, it soon disappeared, but those sounds remained for just a few minutes before disappearing themselves. Now, do I believe these people are seeing Santa? I mean, who am I to say, right? If you believe in the possibility of tulpas, thought forms made real through sheer willpower, then you have to say to yourself, maybe Santa could be manifested. Maybe what we're seeing is Saint Nicholas. Saint Nicholas was a real person. Miracles are associated with him. So these visitations of Santa might be visitations of Saint Nicholas himself, the same way that we see visitations from the Virgin Mary and Saint Francis of Assisi. There's no reason for them not to be. Maybe these are just dreams, misremembrances. Maybe it's parents having a little bit of fun with their kids. Or maybe this is something not quite as benevolent as Santa Claus, masquerading itself, giving abduction victims false memories. Thank you so much for joining us here on Strange Pathways. I'm not going to go through my spiel of click this, do that, join this. I just want to say thank you so much for the wonderful year that you guys have given me. This has been an absolute joy doing week after week after week. I am still working slowly towards a Patreon, but I want to let you guys know I'm not going to keep anything behind a paywall. It's there may be a situation in the future that we do early releases and what have you, but keeping stuff behind a paywall, just, it doesn't seem quite right. But if we do a Patreon, there'll be stuff. I said I wasn't going to talk about this. What I do want to say is thank you. The listeners out there who have contacted me, who comment, who really keep me going. It's wonderful. And I love to see those numbers rise and rise and rise. And believe me, I know this week's episode wasn't for everybody. But I wanted to make sure that you guys had something for Christmas. Once again, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you. Thank you so much. And as always, take care of yourselves and each other.